There's been a bit of a media storm around Glenn, who did work at Champion Data, has a lot of friends in the
Fox
media.
Footy, very close.
This is what happened on Monday night on Footy Classified.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I'd like to know one positive list management move they've made in the last 4 or 5 years.
Are you suggesting they go at North Melbourne to stats base? Is that the intel you
well, their list manager is from Champion Data. He spent 20 years there, Glenn Luff, so I would think that's an element that they saw as a strength of his.
Now, I've got some thoughts on Glenn Luff's resignation. I am convinced now the club tried to get him to stay. This is North Melbourne man, champion North Melbourne defender, David King, tonight on Fox Footy.
Glenn Luff, well, really unfair, I thought, on Monday night for Kane to single him out. He's been there for 3 drafts, and one of the drafts he got there 4 days before the draft. So you can't really count that. To put his name to that, I thought, was grossly unfair. Not one list decision is made by one person.
We single out recruiters all the time on this show, and Kane didn't single out Glenn Luff and say it was all his fault. He was the one recruiter he named. Now, my understanding, Ed, is that Glenn Luff has resigned as a direct result of what happened on Footy Classified on Monday night, which speaks to the disenchantment and paranoia at North Melbourne at the moment. Glenn Luff apparently has said to friends that this was the final straw for him. He said that to the club, to hear that reported. He believes, Ed, that the comments about him might have been leaked. He might have been targeted by others at the club. Maybe the CEO, maybe one of the coaches, I'm not sure. Now, who leaves a football club on the basis of one negative comment if everything's fine at the football club?
Well, I spoke to Glenn because I know him through my time at Fox Footy, and he did some work for me at Collingwood in the day, and I find him to be a fantastic analyst and with a great football mind. He mentioned to me, and I think it's important we say this because Brady Rawlings, he said Brady Rawlings is fantastic. But he did mention to me that there had been a build-up and that Kane's comments were the tipping point for him.
Ed, why is that? So surely Kane, it's a tipping point for him because it's public pressure. But did Glenn speak to you about his relationship with David Noble then?
No, he didn't go into it. No, I was ringing up to see how he was.
Yeah, OK.
Right, so I wasn't on the record. That part I asked if I could mention. But the simple fact is, Kane's entitled to sit there and say exactly what he said and name whoever, because that's what comes with the job. But also people are entitled to say, this is too much for me, you know, it's affecting... Well, and if you're not right for that, then for a million reasons, it's time to go.
Well, I think that's the point. Yeah. It's hot in the kitchen. It's hot in the kitchen. And some people aren't made for it. And it's all good when things are going well, seas are smooth, but when it gets rough, you've got to have a real strength of character and a perseverance and a resilience. Because there's plenty of clubs, Adrian Dodoro, the Carlton were getting slaughtered last year. And what happens when their performance isn't good? Next minute it's the recruiting. I could bring up ad nauseum how many articles Carlton's recruiting was terrible, but now everyone's pumping it up. So it goes with the territory.
Look, clearly Glenn Luff feels that someone within the club is out to get him. That's a bad scene. We tried to get the CEO, Ben Amarfio, on the show tonight. We also tried to get Sonia Hood on the show tonight. Sonia Hood, the president of the club, assures us she will come on, just not in the middle of a storm. I understand that. But the club instead have chosen to do their public speaking in a forum within the 4 walls. It was quite unusual the way it unfolded today.
We went into this knowing that it was going to be tough, and it is tough. Would we like the margins to be less, the margins for losing to be less? Of course we would. But nothing we're seeing isn't anything that we expected. Rebuilds are slow, they take time, and you can't speed it up. We'd love the universe to move more quickly, but you can't hurry people's development.
Like all of us, when you make some mistakes, you're in a bad way. It's when you finally take ownership and understand that there's an issue that you can actually get better. I think North Melbourne Footy Club, I think that they think everything's going okay. For whatever reason, I don't think they're being completely honest with themselves. Like I said, you can't improve until you actually acknowledge that we're broken.
So you've got the head of the media department interviewing the coach, the CEO, who we just heard from then, Ben Amarfio, and Brady Rawlings. I found that unusual, and I found Ben Amarfio's comments, were they a cop-out?
Yeah, it's what you've got to be really, really careful, Ross, and I'll be interested in your thoughts, because you've been there, Eddie, but because you're selling to a lot of people that nothing we're seeing isn't what we expected. But the last 6 weeks has been 60 points on average. So are you saying that's what you expected?
But it might seem shallow, but if I compare it to Collingwood and went Ed, or there's West Coast. The perception of North Melbourne, they're a battling club. For the seriousness of what's occurring and the pressure, that was nickel and dime. That was a casual couch. They were all presented differently. It was in-house. It wasn't what I needed to see. I'd need to see a professional, slick outfit, because every time you present, it's symbolic. To me, that's symbolic of where they're at. It was casual, it looked unprofessional, and it was mediocre. I
don't think we've seen enough of Ben. You know, I was critical of him, and he's probably sick of me saying this, for not going to the hub in the first COVID year. And the club, they all admit now that that was a mistake. There were reasons, but it was wrong. New coach, new footy boss, didn't work, ended in disaster. But I think Matthew's right, Ed, to say nothing that's happening now is not what we expected. Surely this rebuild, which really began in 2018 and with Brad Scott, and then they didn't want to go along with him and they didn't agree with his direction. Then they started again, of course, under Rhys Shaw.
Well, can I talk
They lost
about
2 years there. And now they've lost all their recruiting people, so they've gone back again.
Well, that was a pivotal moment. Yeah. 2018. Brad Scott went to the board. They 12 wins, 10 losses, and there was a lot of noise. And he went and said, we need to continue the rebuild. We need to trade some of our best players, get first-round picks in. And it was Ben Buckley and Glenn Archer, and they weren't aligned with that. And they disagreed. He continued on. He was gone by round 10, and Rhys Shaw was appointed, and Rhys Shaw was bullish on we're a top-forward team. And to your point, they're still suffering the consequences of misjudging. And then what happens is the president and the director, they pick up and go, and they're left behind trying to tidy it up. But I don't think you can, for the series, you can do it in-house. Front the media and sell hope, and don't give everybody an alibi. They should be, because I didn't hear any of this. This is what we expect over pre-season. And they were selling hope.
Wayne Carey pretty much I'm putting these words, heads in the sand, potentially, to think not addressing the problems. And I want to ask you...
You can't fix a problem unless you admit you've got one.
Caro, can I ask you a question? If you'd have rung me and Colin was in this situation and I said, I'll come on the show in a couple of months when it all cools down, would you have been as sanguine about my performance if that was the case? Or are we looking after...
I'm going to cut Sonia Hood some slack.
I think so too, because I hear she's fantastic.
It's her first year.
Yeah,
I know she's been on the board for a while. Yeah. You're a seasoned media performer, and you enjoy the cut and thrust and the combat, and you know how to handle it.
Can I put this to you, though? North Melbourne people today have spoken to me, and David King was one of them, and Glenn Luff, and I think a few of the other people there would have liked the club to come out after Kane Cornes' comments and say, we're all in this together. It's not just one person. We're in it. We're in it as a club. We're in it as players. From the rub-down table to the boardroom, we're all in it together.
But are they, though?
Well,
I think that's a great point.
They are not united.
Well, that's the problem. Okay. I love what Ed said. Yeah. If it was a player, you come out and support him. You support Horn Francis, come out and support your staff. Otherwise, you will lose them.
Caro, before we move on to Adam Simpson, you said the coach and player relationship is disturbing.
So David Noble?
Yeah, on David Noble. Yep. So we'll get to West Coast shortly. But
he's got a lot of work to do to win back the players because of the outbursts, because of the sprays, because of the bad temper. Now, the club tells me that David Noble is trying to change and is changing and has already changed. But I still believe there's a bit of us and them about what's going on between the coaches and the
But he's
players.
got the support of Ben Amafio?
Well, he does at the moment.
Yeah. But it's not congruent with the appointment. The appointment was a teaching coach and nurturing. That's the bit I'm struggling with. But pressure does funny things to you.
Yeah, so and you've got the well, not the ghost, but the spectre, I suppose, of Adam Simpson, who's really struggling at West Coast at the moment, has coached them to a flag, but who could be coming to the end of his tenure there, not contractually, but things are not going well. North Melbourne man, we know David King has been desperate to get him back there in the past, and Glenn Archer. You can't imagine Adam Simpson going from the richest club in the AFL to the poorest. I hate to be brutal.
But you raised out, though, over the last 24 hours about Adam and West Coast.
Because I have raised out over his future there. I mean, you do wonder with the things the players did behind his back, whether maybe it's time for those two to, break their relationship.
Could you see him coaching nowhere next year?
Yes, I could, because I think Adam Simpson has a big future somewhere, and it might not be in footy. But I know that North Melbourne would be going hell for the leather to get him back to their footy club.